What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Go Talk with Marcus, powered by Poddex, fueled by Goat Fuel. Once again, joining me on the show, probably one of my favorite Sixers fans I know, Jerm of Stuff About Sports. What's up, man? How you doing?
What's up, bro? How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. By the way, this is being recorded post game one of the Eastern Conference Semis, so I'm sure you're not feeling that well.
Not really. Not exactly.
Given what we saw from James Harden and your boys in game one of that series. We'll get into that a little bit later. Want to start first, obviously, by talking about the Sixers and the Raptors in first round. Sixers get the job done in 6. They almost became the victims of the first ever 3-0 blown lead in the playoffs. Doc Rivers goes on a playoff rant at some point, talking about how you have to look at those teams that he was coaching. One of those teams was a Magic team. One of those teams was the Clippers, and then there was another team with the Celtics. Do you think there's any truth to what Doc was saying as far as sometimes those leads matter based on who you're playing it, or do you think it's inexcusable if you have a lead, you got to keep it no matter what?
So I went back and looked at the teams. There was a lot of injuries to his best players, and the 1 year with the Magic, yes, you could say there was Hall of Fame Tracy McGrady there, but they were also the 8th seed. Yeah. So, yeah, there's a good, if you want to call it a defense, there's a good defense. I mean, I could buy a lot what he's saying, but at the end of the day, you're up 3-1, and you have to find a way to win, and it can't always be on the players. And Doc has a notorious history of throwing his players under the bus. And he did say at the end of the rant that there's some responsibility on him. But I would argue that if you have a 3-1 lead, especially on a team that you feel probably shouldn't be up 3-1, then that's not on the players. That is actually indeed on the coach. So, I can buy the defense. I understand where he's going with saying that, but blowing a 3-1 lead's a 3-1 lead, and that's your cross that you have to bear. That's on you, Doc.
I mean, I agree. Like, okay, right. Like the 8th seed, he had the Magic. I think they ended up blowing that lead to the Pistons, who went on championship
to win.
Year.
Yep.
So there's that. But like, if you got a 3-1 lead, like, you know, this, like, a win is a win is a win is a win. Like a lead is a lead is a lead is a lead, regardless of, you know, who's on the team, regardless of all that. Like, we don't look back in some of these other instances and say, oh, well, because that team shouldn't have been there anyway. Like, yeah, they shouldn't have been there, but they had the lead. So it's in the playoffs, it doesn't really matter what your seeding is, really, because at that point, we're all looking at one goal, which is win a championship. So you got to hold on to that lead. Obviously, that comes up given that they were on the cusp of potentially blowing a 3-0 lead. And if the Raptors would have won game 6, it would have been the first time since, I believe, 2004 that a team had come back from down 3-0 to force a game 7. With all that being said, though, the Sixers did hold on to their lead, and they are now in the Eastern Conference semis. However, in that game-winning series, or that series-winning game, Pascal Siakam broke Joel Embiid's face.
Dirty player, Pascal Siakam.
And because of that, Joel Embiid has already missed game 1. He's looking like he's going to miss game 2 and maybe game 3. This is where it gets a little bit dicey for you. Where do you see the Sixers sitting upon the return of Joel Embiid? Because we saw this with the Mavericks in the first round, where they were able to steal, I believe, 2 games it was before Luka came back in game 4 in the first round against the Jazz.
Yep.
Do you think the Sixers can do the same? Can they stay afloat without Joel Embiid, or is this get him back on the court as soon as possible?
Before I get started, I just want to blame Scott Foster, who is the referee for game 4. And you know where I'm going with this, because we've had this conversation. The fix is in. He's Canadian, so he didn't want his home country team to get swept at home. So he cost the Sixers with his awful officiating in game 4, which indubitably ruined the Sixers sweep, which led to extra games where Joel Embiid broke his face. So Joel Embiid breaking his face from diabolical hater Pascal Siakam is all Scott Foster's fault, and the NBA should investigate. Now, Marcus, you may be a little too young for this, but for the kids at home, Scott Foster was the right-hand man of another notorious referee by the name, who's getting a documentary pretty soon, by the name of Tim Donaghy, who was kicked out of the NBA, and I can't remember if he went to jail or something happened to him where he was betting and throwing NBA games. I lived through that. That story was an insane story. He is lucky that social media didn't exist back then.
Oh, social media would have lit him a new one, like they do with the ump in baseball that just
Angel Hernandez
ripped him a new one.
So the Sixers, if the problem with the Sixers is, and this is on Doc Rivers, the first half of that game, the Sixers played the way they were supposed to play.
Right.
Doc Rivers continues to play DeAndre Jordan for whatever reason. I get that they go way back, but they were like plus 23 when he wasn't on the floor, and they were like minus 24 when he was on the floor. He's not good anymore. It's like and I had the stat pulled up and I lost it because I was trying to get back to your screen. But it was just there's no excuse. And then he has the nerve to say, we're going to play DeAndre Jordan. We don't care what you say because our guys believe in him. Like, oh, here we go. When DeAndre Jordan's off the floor, which was 31 minutes of that game, the Sixers had a net rating of 11.6 and an offensive rating of 103.2, which is awesome. But when he was on the floor, Dwayne, for 17 minutes of the game, negative 68 net rating and only a 90 offensive rating. He's like you have to adjust.
Yeah,
I get it. Paul Reed needs to learn how to stop. He's too hyper. He's too much energy. He gets into foul trouble too easy. So I do understand that. But DeAndre Jordan, playing him is a detriment to the Sixers. You have to go deeper. I don't understand what the small ball lineup of Tobias Harris at the 5. I don't know why we couldn't run that more, because we were giving Bam Adebayo fits. He was way too physical. And DeAndre Jordan doesn't jump for rebounds. All he's out there to do is catch lobs from James Harden. And it's just it's bad to watch. So I read that Joel Embiid does feel a lot better than he did a couple days ago. I don't know what that means. They're hoping he returns for the 2 games in Philly. I was hoping that the Sixers can steal at least one of these, but I wouldn't. I would assume that we're going to lose both of these Heat home games, go down 0-2. If Joel Embiid, obviously, he's going to come back with a mask. I mean, he's already played with a torn thumb. Yeah. He's getting rest from that. He's been resting his face.
Yeah.
I was actually encouraged by how well the Sixers were fighting without Joel Embiid up until that second half when Doc
the wheels just completely fell off in the second half.
We couldn't. I'm not going to think that we're going to shoot that bad from 3, even though I have a huge problem with, hey guys, you're jacking up a lot of threes, giving them free turnovers, and you're not making them. I don't know. Yeah. Stop shooting threes. I mean, I get that you're trying to get back into the game, but get to the foul line, drive, get easy baskets. Just going down the court and jacking up threes and giving the Heat, who's awesome in transition, especially when the Sixers defense are awful in transition defense, giving them free possessions is never a smart idea with all their athleticism and all their shooters. So I think I would personally, I would probably I would start Paul Reed. I would go down. There's a lot of Sixers fans that think Charles Bassey is like some savior. I'm not one of those guys. Yeah, he's a nice energy guy. I don't mind bringing him in, but he's not going to come in and win you a playoff game. I would run Paul Reed. Hope he stays out of foul trouble, but I would run Tobias Harris at the 5, Matisse Thybulle at the 4, Danny Green, Maxey, and Harden lineup. And because when that lineup was in, Bam wasn't doing nothing, and our 2-3 zone defense was stymieing that Heat offense.
So let's talk about Harden. I mean, because in the series against the Raptors, he averaged like 41 minutes a game. He averaged 19, 10, and 5, had a steal and a block, shot 41% from the field, 38% from 3, 86% from the line. It didn't look, from the stat point, aside from the massive drop in points per game, he looks like he's playing efficiently. To actually look at him play basketball and look at him. Brian Windhurst has gone on record earlier, I think it was earlier today, and he said that this is basically the new normal for James Harden. Like, we're not gonna the years of 30-6 and 32-7, those years over. Yeah. First of all, as a fan, but then also like as just general expectations, is it unrealistic to expect James Harden to get back into being the most prolific scorer of all time as far as giving us the 30 and the 6 and letting Maxey facilitate? Or do you just think that the Sixers should adjust because this is the new normal of 19, 20, and 10 from James Harden?
So we're talking about Houston Rockets James Harden, right? The guy who was dropping 40, 50 points per game. Remind me, Dwayne, how many championships does that version of James Harden have?
0.
How many Western Conference Finals appearances does that version of James Harden have?
1, I think.
Maybe 1, right?
Yeah, 1, I think.
I think. So that we'll go with no. Any significant...
they had the one in 2019 when they had 2 terrible shooting nights back to back after being up.
After being up, yes. So any significant winning at all coming from that version of James Harden?
Not at all.
So why are we clamoring for that version of James Harden to come back? I don't. Am I off? Am I missing something? Like it could be just me, but I keep seeing that. I'm like, wait, why would we want that version of James Harden? I'm enjoying this version of James Harden. I just wish he would shoot a little bit better from three. But he's averaged double-digit assists. I mean, every game since he's been here, damn near.
Yeah.
Especially, and he's definitely done it in the playoffs.
Yeah.
His job is a point guard. When we trade it now, again, I did not want James Harden on this team. The Sixers would have been a lot better off if we took the Buddy Hield, Tyrese Halliburton. We only needed two more shooters. We could have flipped just Ben Simmons for two shooters, which we could have done if you listen to all the reports from Wendy and some of these other NBA insiders. We could have had Derek White and Dejounte Murray for Ben Simmons and some picks. That would have been fantastic. But when all this was happening, when we were trying to unload Ben Simmons, I said we only need two shooters.
Yeah.
The rest of the lineup, we could have kept Drummond. We could have kept if we would have had two shooters. If the same situation where Joel Embiid broke his face, he was missing this game, and we kept Seth and we kept Andre and we had two extra shooters, we would have no problem with the Miami Heat. Now, if Joel Embiid comes back anywhere between 70 to 80%, I think we can win this series because, as evidenced by how Miami was playing, nobody's stopping Joel Embiid. Nobody. Not one person, which takes off pressure. I'm glad that Tobias Harris was the only one that showed up to play yesterday. A lot of these guys, George Niang's not going to go 0 for 11 from three again. Like some of our bad shooting, Tyrese Maxey didn't have a great game in terms of shooting. James Harden didn't have a great game in terms of that. Like that doesn't happen that often. You're going to get one of those playoff games. I'm not going to anticipate that's going to happen the next game. But James Harden with no Joel Embiid, does he need to be 50-point James Harden and dribble for 23 seconds and jack up a shot like he did in Houston for all those years, not winning anything? No. He needs to score more than 16 points. He needs to be a 20 and 10 guy, especially if Tobias Harris is going to play out of his mind and give you 27 points. Tyrese Maxey, for some reason, is skirting blame because he's a second-year player. But if we're going to treat him like a superstar like we've done all year, you have to come up big in these playoff games. And he has moments, but that has to be sustained. Danny Green, he takes a couple of those bad threes and he's streaky, but when he's on, he's on. I'm not counting him out to have bad shooting for rest. Matisse Thybulle, I think ever since his COVID stuff came out, like he's just been awful. Like he's just been. I think the social media aspect, because he's a kid. I think he's looking at all the people cursing him out for missing the Toronto series at the home games in Toronto. Now he's not playing at all. His offense. I mean, before we used to be able to count on his defense. He was never a great offensive player, but now he can't even play a drop of offense. It's like having another Ben Simmons out there, and he's also Australian, so maybe it's like an Australian thing. But I think that the Sixers will be fine. Hopefully we play better in game 2. And then we'll see what happens in game 3 and 4. But I do think if Joel Embiid does come back for the rest of the series after game 2, I do give the Sixers a good shot because I trust Joel Embiid, and I don't think that the Heat have an answer for him.
Well, I mean, I've been, and because you've been there for most of the times I've said it, like Joel Embiid, I think is the most unstoppable player outside of Giannis in the East. Like, there's not an answer for Joel Embiid, I think, defensively, definitely not on the Heat. There wouldn't have been one on Brooklyn. Like, there's not one on, like, the only answer for Joel Embiid is Giannis, and that's because for some god-awful reason, Joel Embiid plays fantastic against KD and all these other guys. Those games against Giannis is when he always tends to tip the scales, and it's never that same dominant Joel Embiid that we get. But Joel Embiid last season was the most efficient player on a minute-to-minute basis until their untimely exit in the playoffs to the Hawks. Like, he had more points total than he did a minutes played. Like, Joel, I think, is going to be great. I think what these two games, in my opinion, are as far as importance for the Sixers is, would it be nice to steal a game in Miami? It'd be great to steal a game in Miami so you can go back home with the series tied. But Miami was one of the best teams in the league at home, and if Harden's not being efficient from three, and if Doc's not making the appropriate adjustments, and if Tyrese Maxey isn't continuing to be consistent how he was through the course of the regular season, then that's a tall task, because you have a Jimmy Butler, and you have a Bam Adebayo, and you've got a PJ Tucker who's a dog, and you have one of, if not the deepest bench in the NBA, like with Tyler Hero and Gary Vincent and Max Strus and all those guys. Like, they have depth for days. I don't think I've ever seen a basketball team just run all 12, 13 guys in a playoff game. Usually that's when rosters shrink. The Heat say, no, we're gonna play all 12 guys no matter what the situation is, and it works for them. My big issue with the Sixers right now is if you look back to that 2019 year when they made that run, and again, very lucky shot knocks them out the playoffs. Look at how that was formatted. Not Ben Simmons. Joel Embiid was option 1, or you can say that Jimmy Butler was option 1. But like that was your 1 and your 2. You had Tobias Harris as your 3, and Ben Simmons was the 4th option. If everybody's healthy, you have that same format of you have Joel Embiid be your number 1 guy, and James Harden your number 2 guy. Tyrese Maxey your 3rd guy, Max and Harris your 4th guy, or maybe you want to flip that. Yeah. But if they can't get in a rhythm without Joel Embiid being on the floor, it's going to make it that much more difficult for them to get in and stay in a rhythm when Joel does return to the lineup, because he's going to be back for game 3. Especially if they lose game 2, Joel Embiid is going to be back in game 3. Maybe if they can steal a game, and maybe they can steal game 2, the coaching staff says, okay, let's keep him out for game 3 just because we do have that 1 extra game leverage. Or maybe you put him anyway. It doesn't really matter. But Joel Embiid, as great as he is, and he can't do it by himself. And I think the reason why a lot of people are clamoring for the old James Harden is because on paper that looks like championship winning when you combine that with Joel Embiid. If you've got Harden going for 30-40 a night and you have Embiid going for 30-10-10 a night, or 30-15 and 10 a night, whatever it is, that looks like championship winning basketball. And sure, on paper it does, but like
that's NBA 2K stuff. It didn't work. It didn't work.
That didn't muster anything. That didn't bring up any championship, not even a single finals appearance. Even when the 2018 Warriors, when KD goes down with an injury and you have the lead at home with a chance to close out up 3-2 and you can't do it. And then again in game 7, like that's not championship winning basketball. Should James Harden be more efficient? Absolutely. You can always expect more efficiency because he's proven he can be a very prolific and efficient scorer. That's a notable argument. But to expect James Harden at this point in his career to give you 35 a night in a playoff series, like that's not good. And that's also not going to be good for Tyrese Maxey, who needs the ball in his hands to kind of get in his rhythm. That's not good for Tobias Harris, who this is a ball movement basketball team. Like that's what they do. So ISO ball is not going to work, especially against the Miami Heat, who have no problem sending 3-4 bodies at James Harden and force him to make a bad pass. Like that's not going to work in this series. Now, I know we talked about them briefly at the beginning, but I do want to go back to them because they were part of the first round series. Let's talk about the Raptors, right? Because Scotty Barnes is Rookie of the Year and Pascal Siakam's doing his thing, and Fred VanVleet did miss a couple games due to injury.
Yeah.
All these guys back, right? This was the 6th seed in the East this year. All these guys back. What steps do you think the Raptors need to take as far as improvement, additions, and free agency and things like that could get them back in this position as far as being a playoff team and potentially competing for a championship? Because we're not that far removed from them winning a championship. It hasn't really been the best. It hasn't been the best form since Kawhi left, probably so, because he's a superstar. What does it take for the Raptors to get back in this spot next year?
I'm glad you said that because the Raptors didn't win no damn championship. Kawhi Leonard won a championship.
Yeah.
I don't know. I love how people like to just clump the Raptors in there, but I mean the Raptors have a good squad. They're coached well. I guess somebody could argue if Fred VanVleet played and Scotty Barnes didn't get injured, maybe it'd be the Raptors versus the Heat. Who knows? They probably they're going to lose Chris Boucher. He's going to command a lot of money, and I don't know if you want to give a bunch of money to him.
No,
he's an offensive big. You need a big who can play some defense. Like you need an anchor.
Joel Embiid and Giannis.
Yeah, you need somebody that can bang. The Raptors, I think I like Siakam and Fred VanVleet. They're a good team, so you don't need like a superstar. I mean, it worked for them to win a championship, so it sounds crazy that I'm saying that. Yeah. But the way their roster is, they don't really need one. Like it just worked out for them to have that. But they have a good roster. They're coached well. But I'd probably, especially with Giannis and you have the Jared Allens in Cleveland of the world, you need big bodies that can play some defense, like a Steven Adams in Toronto, somebody like that. Maybe Steven Adams is a little older, but if you get a player like that, that would be something I would think that the Raptors would need for real, where I would take them seriously. I didn't give them a shot. I thought they would get swept. If it wasn't for Scott Foster, they probably should have been swept. But it's the same problem that a lot of the teams have. You have Joel Embiid, you have Giannis. What are you going to do? You have to get somebody that can bang bodies and take fouls and maybe not contribute on the stat sheet, but contribute in altering the game with their physicality. So that would probably be high on my wish list for Toronto.
I mean, Toronto, like you said, Toronto never really needed a superstar. Of course, you never say no when a superstar decides to grace you with its presence,
Right.
especially if it results in a championship. But they have Nick Nurse. I don't think gets a lot of credit for the coaching that he does. He's a really good coach. I was still a little had a sour taste in my mouth after they just fired Dwayne Casey after he delivered like 3 straight 60-win seasons. But they get a championship out of it. I guess there's not much really I can say. I guess that's why I don't make these decisions. What do I know? But like they have a lot of talent. You have Fred VanVleet, you've got Siakam, you have Scotty Barnes who won rookie of the year. Like there's talent. They definitely could use a big, like a defensive big, when you have to deal with Giannis Antetokounmpo and Joel Embiid, where if you want to win a championship, you're going to have to go through one, if not both of those guys to get there again. So that's major. Last thing, I know we talked about earlier, but I do want to talk about again one more time. Game 2 is tomorrow or today, because that's when you guys will be listening and watching. In Miami, are you conceding defeat and taking the 0-2 lead going into Philadelphia, or do you think that Philadelphia can still get the job done and take a 1-1 lead or 1-1 tie into Game 3 for Philly on Friday? I believe is when Game 3 is.
Because I'm a man of high esteem and a man of great pride and honor, I'm never going to concede defeat. But I'm also going to be realistic. I don't think you don't have your best player, so to sit there and act like you're going to go out there. Now Miami played fairly well, but let's slow it down a little bit. People act like Miami blew us out. It was a very close game up until halftime. I don't know what happened at halftime. I think Miami has depth, which is the one thing that the Sixers sacrificed. And so we decided, hey, we're going to be a top-heavy team. Well, when you're missing your biggest gun, you're going to run out of gas, which is exactly what happened to the Sixers. But the Heat only won by 14 points, Dwayne. I mean, it's not like they came out there and blew them out. And the one thing that is Joel Embiid is going to help with is going to be rebounds. They out-rebounded us by 10. Bassie got a lot of quick fouls, even though the Heat had 18 personal fouls and the Sixers only had 17, but a lot of Paul Reed's, the guy who we needed, he grabbed 3 quick fouls in the first quarter. You know what I mean? So it was like it was hard. I mean, and then the rebounding, they especially on the offensive side, they had 15 offensive boards and we only had 9. So field goal percentage was pretty much similar. I mean, we were 6 for 34 again, and they were 9 for 36. So everybody was jacking up threes. But I'm not that's bad. Like to shoot that low at like what 17, 25, 20%, wherever that is. It's not good. It's not good. Try to draw fouls. Like I get that it's frustrating. If you don't get the foul call, you stand there and you throw your hands in the air and blah, blah, blah. They have to call it eventually. Just keep driving and trying to score. And eventually you'll get those calls because eventually they can't ignore it. And so I've been taught that since PAL basketball, since I was a young kid. If your shots aren't falling, find another way to don't just continue to jack up shots and give the other team extra possessions. Drive, get to the foul line, pass, set picks, do it, hustle, go for loose balls, things like that. A lot of the stuff that the Sixers either were too tired to do or just didn't do, again, falls back on Doc Rivers.
Yeah, Doc talked himself into a little bit of a hole, I think, with this one, because when you say that, blowing 3-1 leads and all that stuff isn't necessarily entirely on the coaching, well, now people are going to be looking to you to make sure that it's not on the coaching. So you're going to have to coach your P's and Q's. Like you said, I watched that first half and I was like, okay, this could be a good game. And maybe, they could still game one. And then second half, they just looked, I don't know if it was with gas. I don't know what it was, but the Sixers just didn't look like they were ready. So that, again, whether it's Doc or execution or a little bit of both, I mean, that does fall on Doc Rivers as far as lack of execution and lack of proper game planning, especially coming out of the half and making adjustments. I'm going to say the Heat are going to win in game 2. Just they were really good. They're really good at home team. I don't think the Sixers are going to completely fall apart in the second half, but I do think that the Heat are going to stick to their same game plan. They like to run. This is one of the best transition offenses, and I think actually the best transition offense in the NBA this season. Like they're going to get out and run. I think that's what their defense does. Is they force turnovers and they run. They force them to bad shots and they run. That's what they like to do. So they're going to probably do more of that. And then it'll be all eyes on Joel Embiid and the Sixers come game 3 and 4. And depending on what happens there, this series can get really, really interesting, or it could get really, really nasty really, really quickly. Before we go, though,
I just wanted to add one more stat to why Sixers fans like me should have hope. Again, 50-point scoring James Harden is gone. Like we need to just get over that. I've accepted that. He's not coming back. But this version of James Harden, if you look, he's really good. He's still averaging 22 and 10 for the season. Like it, and specifically last night, the Sixers were 0 and 10 from three from passes that came directly from James Harden. I mean, so that's 30 points of missed 3-pointers.
30 points, yeah.
From James Harden. We only lost by 14 again. I keep reading that the Sixers were blown out with Joel Embiid. 14 points isn't a blowout.
It's not a blowout.
And a lot of that came from garbage time at the end of the game, whatever. But the Sixers should have hope. I do think, again, the zone was working. I would go small. DeAndre Jordan can't play. Go deeper in the bench. I would just add more. You have to match their athleticism.
That's a 40, almost 50-point swing with DeAndre Jordan's on and off the court to go from plus 23 to minus 24. That's not a winning recipe for basketball, especially not in the playoffs. You're not going to win basketball that way.
Go deep, play everybody but DeAndre Jordan if you have to. And I don't even mind him playing, but you can't start him. Yeah. And I'm cool with him playing 8 minutes, which what I thought he was going to do when he was here. And just don't even include him on the offense, but tell him, hey, buddy, your job is just to bang bodies and make sure they don't cut to the lane and figure it out. But his job is just to take space. And that's the Sixers. It's not going to happen because Doc can't help himself. So we'll see what happens.
Very quickly before we go, please let everybody know where to find you and all your episodes.
Yes, I am Jerm, one half of Stuff About Sports, and you can find us at Stuff About Sports on Facebook and Instagram, and hashtag Stuff About Sports in your Googles, and you will find us on everywhere you get your podcasts. And if you can't find us, you're probably not looking hard enough. You can find us at the hub at www.giveusashot.network. That's the hub for all of our podcasts. So if you just want a buffet list of podcasts to listen to, it's not just sports. We have The Divide, we have 30, we have Pain Train Pipe Bomb, we have a bunch of other stuff going on. So yeah, check us out. Tomorrow me and Bert will be back. I, who do not watch any hockey, will try to predict the NHL playoffs, so that'll be pretty funny.
Much to my enjoyment, I watched the Maple Leafs and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Watched that game. My first playoff hockey game since the Capitals won the Stanley Cup. And I got to watch some fighting, and playoff fighting is so much better than regular season.
So much better. Yeah, I watched her. Well, it's funny. I have, in my current setup, I have my monitor that I'm looking at you on right now, and then I have two 32-inch TVs on either side. I had the Mets on one TV, the Sixers on the other TV, and I've adopted the Carolina Canes since I live here in North Carolina, and so I've adopted the Canes as my hockey team, who are in the playoffs. And I was watching all three of them, and the only team that won were the team that I follow the least, which was the hockey team. So go Canes.
Well, Bert, hopefully Bert and Jerm will be back here on the show a lot as we get through the rest of the playoffs and also as we get into the NFL. This is the final of our first round series recaps. Thank you for watching all of them. If you missed any of them, please go back and look. Peyton Doyle's been on the show. Blaine Spencer's been on the show. We've had Spencer. We've had some others as well. Please make sure you smash that subscribe button. We're sitting at 94 subscribers, which is much better than I thought we'd be at. But if we can get to 100 by the end of the month, I greatly appreciate it. And finally, please head over to collegegirlfoundation.com or org. I'm actually not sure because I haven't been on in a while, but it's College Girl with a U, not an I. It's a foundation that I was fortunate enough to be a part of. The annual College Girl Foundation luncheon is back June 2nd, 2022. Donate or purchase a ticket. It's really cool. Miss Jessica Brown, she wears a lot of hats. She's really awesome, dedicating to education and making sure that children get to and through college in the DC area. I believe all of the students from this year's College Girl Foundation class, I think it's 14 of them, all of them graduated high school and got accepted into college on some form of scholarships. And the very first College Girl Foundation class is graduating this year. So really cool. Please go over there, check it out, donate. Thank you guys for watching. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Follow on the socials you see here at GTP Marcus on everything. Like Jerm said, if you can't find me, you're not trying, because I am so obnoxious everywhere. You're bound to find me somewhere. Use the Googlers. That's what they're there for. So for Jerm, one half of Stuff About Sports, it's Marcus of Go Talk Marcus signing off. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, you guys enjoy the rest of your lives.